Welcome everyone to the Chompcast, the official podcast of Sword Chomp and swordchomp.com. Thank you for downloading or streaming our podcast, taking some time out of your busy life to listen to us. And remember, if you're digging the show, please subscribe and leave us a kind rating wherever you download podcasts, because it helps us, reach a bigger audience. We have an awesome show today as the summer of guests here at Sword Chomp continues, as we have another special guest host, which I will introduce in just a moment, because I like to build up to our special guest host. But first, the Chompcast crew you already know. I'm your host, Morgan Barnes, of course, from Montana. From Michigan, Joshua Fowler's joining us. How you doing, Josh?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys? Doing all right? All right.
I'm okay.
Good.
He's all right. And that man who's doing okay from Texas, the only man I know brave enough, courageous enough to rock a Mr. Mime tattoo. And not just any tattoo, a Mr. Mime tramp stamp. Give it up for Anthony Fisher. How you doing, Fish?
Pretty good. Thank you for that kind intro there. I am the only man who could rock that thing, probably. More than likely.
You got the swagger. You got that swagger, man.
Well, the thing is, it'll never be visible because I keep my hindside covered.
All that beautiful work is just gone to waste.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Fish, we're glad to have you here today. And our very special guest, she is a co-host of an excellent Pokemon podcast called The Rare Candy Podcast. Melanie Dunn is joining us. Hello, Melanie.
Hi, Morgan. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Hi, everyone.
Glad to have you here today. So Is this kind of weird? How you doing? Feeling nervous? Feeling good?
Me? Yeah, I'm a little nervous, but I think once we get into it, it'll be cool.
It will be. Well, we're glad because you're like the first host we've actually had that's actually from another podcast. So
gotcha.
You have that podcasting experience. And I was just curious because me and Fish actually did a Pokemon podcast way back in the day. So like, what? So your podcast, the Rare Candy Podcast, that's a homage to Pokemon that Pokemon fans will know. As Rare Candy is the item that you give your Pokemon to level up more quickly. What inspired you to kind of get into podcasting, especially about Pokemon?
Well, it was my friend Vin's idea, and he just approached me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to do this dumb little project with me?" And it's not dumb at all. It's jumping on the retro gaming trend. Although I will admit that I didn't listen to any other gaming podcasts until he introduced me to this concept. So I didn't know that at first that there's a whole audience of people that just listen to you playing a podcast, and then I learned about Twitch and all this other stuff that I still am delving into. But he was like, yeah, basically we're going to play the old, the Pokemon games and go through the series and talk about them. So I was like, talk about analyzing them in the context of modern games or Pokemon Go. He's like, no, just play the old games and literally talk about them. And I was like, oh, is that an actual thing? He's like, oh, yeah, this is big. So that's what we're doing right now. And, we went into it just figuring, do it for fun and just enjoy it and, keep our overhead low and see where it goes and not worry about turning this into a business. It's funny because I listen to a lot of business and entrepreneurship type podcasts myself because I just like that kind of thing. So I'm instantly like, how can we make money doing this? But, honestly, now it's more about the spirit of just playing the games. It's interesting for me because I'm also a parent of two girls, and my husband is really into the old Nintendo, like the Zelda games and all of that, and teaching our kids about that world. I liked Mario when I was a kid, so we bring that kind of aspect to it. And Vin is more just the kind of he's definitely a true gamer in the sense of he's played everything and he has encyclopedic knowledge off the top of his head about a lot of stuff. Including any Pokemon we encounter. Like, I'm talking about what I think is cool about.
Yeah, he's like a Pokemon. He's a Bulbapedia, a real Bulbapedia.
He really is. We have this one episode where I don't even remember which one we were talking about, but it's one of the bug/grass types, and he starts talking about the the Japanese character, what mythology it's based on, or what real insect it's based on.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing because I'm like, how do you know this? He's like, oh, I took this class in college. We went to college like in the late 90s. So that's where we met. So he just remembers this stuff. So anyway, that's I'll just share that aspect to start.
That's cool. Well, and we're all big Pokemon people, so I think you'll fit right in there, especially for a guest host. We'll talk a little bit more Pokemon later, but I'll put that more toward the end of the show because I got a lot of Pokemon to talk with you. But glad to have you here. It should be fun. We got some cool topics that I will get to today. Among other things, we'll kind of wrap up our talk on Pyre, which is a game we've talked about the last couple of weeks. Me and Fish delved back into No Man's Sky, so we'll probably talk a little No Man's Sky, especially with the 1-year anniversary. And the main topic, well, I got a pretty funny biology topic I also want to talk to you guys about, kind of related to our guest host today. I experimented last week with this weird topic about these sharks that were getting murdered by killer whales. And a lot of people got back with me that they really like that sort of random deviation. So we'll just go. We actually have a biologist. The guy who's not here, Shea. We miss you, Shea. I should have said that at the beginning of the show, but Shea is...
You just remembered now that we missed him.
God, there's... Something is different about this show. I don't know what it is.
You better hope that Shea doesn't listen to this episode now.
Let's be honest, he never listens to the show. He just edits the show. But he has a degree in biology, and he teaches in Japan over there. So anyways, it's always fun to kind of pick his brain with those things. But you brought a couple of fun topics. As our listeners know, if I have a guest on the show, I let them pick the main topic of the show, and even you have a cool subtopic as well. But I'll give it to you, Melanie, if you want to kind of introduce what your main topic of the show is today.
Yeah, I really want to talk about how much I enjoy the role play game aspect of video games. Again, like I said before, I'm not so much into HP, PP, ideal combinations of attacks and strategy. I mean, I like that stuff, but it's sort of just playing the old Pokemon games right now. I'll go along, but I won't worry. I get really stressed if I have to look up Bulbapedia or like one of these websites to kind of talk about what's the best combination to do what. Like, I just want to play the game. And I'm really interested in characters and storylines. Ironically, I'm not even sure. I can talk a little bit more about Pokemon in particular, especially with the anime, which I can get to later. But really, my first sort of awakening into this world, I guess, was whatever Final Fantasy game. I want to say it's Final Fantasy VIII that came out like in 99, I think it was.
That's my favorite game, yeah.
Yeah, 98, 99.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't
Unless you're
play
about to say
it.
something bad about it. Are you about to say something bad about it?
Nothing at all. But what was happening was, so my roommates in college, I had a few of them. Vin was my best friend from college at the time. A couple other people in this house we lived off campus, and people would always come over, and they were always playing Final Fantasy VIII. And ironically, I was the most studious of us, so I was always like in my room studying, and then I would come out to the living room and watch these guys play. Mm-hmm. And I really got into the story of what was, which is funny because I can't spit out what the storyline is now. I just thought the graphics were beautiful, and that's when I realized, you're actually playing as a character, and there's some opportunity for character development and which way the plot is going. I'm also a writer. And I watch a lot of anime and I read, light novels and that kind of thing. So I'm always looking for story ideas. Mm-hmm. Just to bring this kind of full circle back to Pokemon, it's funny that I'm doing this retro gaming podcast now because I never really played the games when the original, like red, blue, yellow, when they first came out. I dabbled with them and then just sort of put them aside on the Game Boy. But I really liked watching the anime. I like watching it more now that it's somewhat easier to find. The original Japanese, you can search on YouTube or wherever.
It's all over Netflix
and
stuff
Netflix has the English. It's
Which
under
is
the
crazy,
kids.
because when I was a kid and I wanted to find Pokemon, I had to go to like my crappy little rental store and get one disc at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, or you could go buy it, buy DVDs, but that was really expensive. And Yeah, I really I like the anime. Um, I'm a little bit sad about what's happened with the anime. Not that it's bad. Well, so you'll notice that I'm calling it an anime instead of cartoon.
Hmm.
It is really interesting how the original season one of Pokemon is very culturally Japanese. And I guess what happened is the creators didn't realize how big Pokemon was going to become in the Western world. So when they kept churning out the games and then churning out the anime, they started making it more. Taking away some of the unique Japanese influences and cultural references in the game and making it
Mm-hmm.
more geared toward a Western, American audience.
Yeah.
With that said, I really like the show, and I want to say they call it Best Wishes over there, but it's based on Pokemon Black and White, about the Unova region, and you have the character N, who, for the first time, you have somebody who's sort of like an animal rights activist for Pokemon, and he feels very strongly against battles and keeping the Pokemon in the Pokeballs. And this is stuff that, there's some of this in the game, and they take more liberties with the anime and in the manga to sort of elaborate on these stories. But I love that. So what I like to do is get caught up on, and I haven't watched all of it, but watch what I'm playing and then go back and play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm sort of a weirdo in that, or I don't know, maybe there's other people like me who are really into the story and the characters more than stats and things like that.
So to kind of full circle it back, so topically you're saying like you're wanting to know, is it what in particular that we're looking for in RPGs? Is it just kind of like individually, like you're more drawn to like the characters and the stories? That is the most important thing. Gameplay is basically secondary, um, above all else. So you're just trying to kind of see what's important to different people, like what they prioritize, and with role playing games or games in general.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess from my perspective, I mean, maybe I'm overanalyzing things a bit because you pick up a game, you enjoy it, and that's all it needs to be. I'm just thinking back to when I was a kid, when like Mario 2 and then Mario 3. Those were my favorite games when I was little, just because they were new at the time, and
Great
I
stories.
I didn't
Great stories.
right. Well, that's the thing. I didn't question. That was when I was a little more of the opposite, where I was just
Mhm.
cool game with little stars and turtle shells flying around. And then it was when I got a little older that I started to be more interested in why do people fall in love with these games. And I got the sense that most gamers just it's fun. It's sort of like you can just let go, stress relief and not think too hard about it. I tend to overanalyze and think really hard about things. So,
I was going to say one thing that I think I can spiral off that topic, and then I'll throw it to Josh and Fish here because I want to get their thoughts. Is it's funny that the game you mentioned, if it was Final Fantasy VIII, was
it
kind of
was.
at a turning point for a lot of gaming, especially with the PlayStation era, where especially those Final Fantasy games and those JRPGs were just trying to do some really bold things with storylines, where they're coming out with these games that were 4 discs long. They had these really long cinematics, full motion video sequences, and those games are 40, 50 hours long with tons of dialogue. And that was kind of I remember as a kid too, that was a turning point for me in thinking like, wow, video games are so much more than the games I loved as a kid, which like Donkey Kong, where you just run and
right,
jump.
exactly.
So I think there is something to that, where that grabs hold of people. But I mean, how do you feel about that, Josh, when Melanie's talking about those things?
I'm kind of a similar mindset as far as what I'm into gaming for, but it kind of depends what sort of a mood I'm in. Because if I want something that I really want to think about, something that has a really deep story is what I want. But occasionally I do want to just veg out, just turn on something and play it just to play. And I don't know, I kind of think of it like, kind of like movie genres. Like, you don't always want to watch a horror movie. It's just, sometimes you want to watch a dumb summer movie. Sometimes you want to watch, a comedy. It just kind of depends what sort of a mood you're in.
A rom-com, maybe you just
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, but
a little, yeah.
but